if I may just finish this. If I may finish my point,
deal with
Dasha.
racism,
I think I will be better
positioned. But you're denying that racism is a problem.
I've never denied that racism is a problem. And if you listen to the response I gave to that black pastor, my whole point is racism has been a major problem for most of our national history. But we're getting close to the promised land that Martin Luther King envisioned. We're as darn close to it as we ever have been. And so what bothers the heck out of me is it's right when we're close to that promised land. Martin Luther King said it, I may not get there with you, and he didn't get there with us. But I think it desecrates the legacy of our civil rights movement, desecrates the legacy of Martin Luther King, that right when we get closest to the point of having racial equality and gender equality and even opportunities for people of minorities of many types, are we perfect? No. But are we as close as we've ever been? Yes, we have. To then obsess over systemic racism, to then obsess over white guilt and otherwise, we're creating new waves of racism, Dasha, that we otherwise would have avoided right when we're closest to having achieved what even the proponents of the civil rights movement would have dreamed of.
What's going on, everyone? Sauce Kenny here today, and you saw that intro. Great intro. I love that clip. It pretty much exemplifies everything that I always speak on this channel. If you haven't known, if you're new here, I talk about how a lot of the problems that we deal with was less than the problems that our American ancestors such as Martin Luther King and them dealt with, right? And I'm saying in a country where black people face the least amount of racism in American history, we complain about racism the most. Imagine that. Martin Luther King didn't complain about racism that much. He spoke out against it. He spoke out against a problem that was observable, provable. He can showcase, like, look at these laws. Now, if you ask black Americans today the same question, hey, what laws are stopping you from achieving what you needed to achieve? There's nothing on the books. Or they use racism as an alibi. They use their race as an alibi. Oh, it's because I'm black. That's why I got fired from this job. Hint, Harvard. It's because I'm black. That's why people are criticizing me of plagiarism. They don't believe black people can be this excellent. No. You got caught with plagiarism and you're trying to use your race as a shield to shield you from accountability. You use it as a means of throwing blame on something outside of your own abilities and your own actions. That's the problem I have with black America today. In black culture, it seems so popular to be in victimhood. That you get more props being a victim than being a victor. And I'm tired of that. This is why I like Vivek. Vivek is, to me, he is, if I ever can say what a president should be, what kind of messaging and vision an American president should have, this is Vivek. This is American excellence. That it's your merits that decide your outcomes, not your race. While the left and these progressives, they want your race and your identity to decide your outcomes, not your merit. And this is why they keep hiring these bad people to represent minorities, and they fail at the job because they weren't evaluated based on their abilities and qualifications. They were evaluated based on what boxes they check. And that is inherently sexist, racist, and wrong. But I digress. Let's go more into this interview where Vivek starts pretty much exposing the media and in real time they're trying to craft narratives around what he has to say. And he's just straight up debunking them. All the lady had, I think her name was Daisha Burns. All she had was word salad, and this man came with facts. Let's take a look.
We can't have it both ways. We have to have an honest discussion.
Straw man arguments.
This is not a straw man.
You brought up Jussie Smollett as the best example of white
Smollett was the hottest thing in news in the back of a fake actual attack on him that we have to contend with.
And yet you have examples like the Buffalo shooter in New York just in 2022.
You have other examples.
But you are also cherry picking when you bring up Jussie Smollett.
I'll look at all of the statistics. More black on black crime. If you really care about actual crime against black Americans, let's get to the root causes of it in the inner cities of this country.
The Anti-Defamation League tracked a 38% increase in white supremacist propaganda last year.
Who's tracking that?
The Anti-Defamation League.
Yeah, the ADL, I don't think is a particularly credible source
so
when they have cherry-picked information.
So who are we supposed to look to when we're talking about
I would suggest look at there's a table, 2x2 table. Federal law enforcement data, which you could say what you do. Maybe we shouldn't believe that either. But look at black on Asian crime, black on black crime,
the FBI
hate
crime statistics. That's a law enforcement agency. 59.1% was based on race, ethnicity, and ancestry, saying hate crimes rose 12% between 2020 and 2021.
Look at the absolute crimes themselves. What they classify as a hate crime is itself a political judgment. I think that when you actually care about protecting life, if you want to say Black Lives Matter, let's look at where Black lives are actually being lost. It's in the cities, at the heart of other black Americans and criminals
that's
that are restrained by the absence
that we talk about as well. But are we supposed to ignore white supremacist hate crimes?
We're not supposed to ignore any kind of crime, Dasha. That's what I say. But what I see is a selective reporting. Take the Nashville Transgender Shooter Manifesto. Every shooter manifesto in a mass shooting has been released within 48 hours, except for that one shooter in Nashville. Now, it ended up being leaked. What do you see? It wasn't a white supremacist. It was somebody that was actually making fun of using derogatory terms. I believe.
Okay, so why are you okay talking about that manifesto and not talking about the manifesto from the 2015?
I'm more than okay talking about both. But what I'm asking is, why is the mainstream media suppress that one? Why did the police suppress that one? Why was that the one shooter manifesto that of all of the mass shootings, every other shooter manifesto has been released? I'm focused on that one because that's the one that's been hidden from us. And it comes back to the point of my candidacy and the way I'm going to run this country. Trust the people with the truth.
Yeah, I agree. Trust people with the truth. And the truth of the matter is that here's this tweet from where I got this video from. Vivek explains to Daisha that the absolute crime data breaks the media's racial narrative. Per capita, the black-on-black homicide rate is approximately 5,900% that of white-on-black rates. Here's the 2019 crime in the U.S. This is the homicide rate, and here you go. Black Americans total, whites 3, whites 2. Then if you just look down the line, look black, African American unknown, and this is the table as you look down. And this is the notes I'm referencing. It's from a 2019 FBI crime data report, and it shows a graph between offenders based on race. And you see on the column on the right, you see black victims. It's 346,000 about victims, black victims from black people, right? And then if you look on the left, black and white victims, it's 400. So if you look at white, only 89,000 victims. So white on black crime is lower than black on black crime. Imagine that. And even higher than black on black crime in 2019. This is 2019 data, so this data might be outdated. You can make the argument that 85% of hate crime, if we're defining hate crime as attacking another person based on a different race, that's considered a hate crime based on the left's definition, right? No other factors are considered. 85% of the time, black people are the biggest perpetrator of hate crime. That's just, and my argument is just because they commit more crime, right? And with that rise of, hate crime has risen. Well, for the longest time during the 2020, I forget the time, maybe someone in the comment section can help me remember. There was a time where there was a bunch of black people attacking elderly Asian people in San Francisco. They didn't want to consider that a hate crime. They didn't want to consider it hate crime at all. So even in the double standard, when things don't fit their narrative, the media tend to not report it based on with the same standards they report on other crimes, right? This is why whenever a white person do something to a black kid, it gets spread out all around the news because it's so rare that it happens that in and of itself it gets so much attention. But when a black person dies in Chicago, no one reports on it because that's normal, right? You're not going to get clicks off of normal, off the usual. You get clicks off the unusual. Oh, look, a white person finally kills a black person. Spread it all over the news. And this has been my biggest argument. I say, hey, if it was a reoccurring occurrence, we would know this already. But no, they focus on things that happen less likely statistically, and they highlight that, and they keep only bring attention, and they only show you those instances in those stories, while other stories that go against their narrative, they kind of bury it or they ignore it. And this is the power that mainstream media has. And this is why I said media is the most dangerous entity on this world, because it can make you believe a narrative that's not necessarily true.
You've put a lot of ideas out there. You've suggested on the campaign trail that January 6th was an inside job, that the plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer was a job of inside entrapment, that the House Republicans, let me finish, that the House Republicans impeachment inquiry is part of a Democratic plot to sideline Biden, that there is a devious Democratic scheme to actually nominate Nikki Haley. The reality is none of these are top issues for Iowan for Iowa voters. So why are you focused on these conspiracy theories?
Well, focused is a heavy-handed word, Dasha. If you take 80% of what I said, I'm talking about policy and future direction of the country, talking about how we'll increase the supply of energy to bring down the cost for everyday Americans. And so that's 80% of what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to hide from what I do believe are realities hiding in plain sight that people deserve to know about, which the last item that you described. It's not a secret that Larry Fink is going to fundraisers of Nikki Haley, propping her up. That actually one.
Yeah, and the reason why Vivek brings this stuff up is to highlight, hey, look at the people who want this candidate to run. Look how much effort they put into Nikki Haley and making her the nominee. Look how every time, every debate, when we the people think, hey, Vivek totally crushed that debate, they put out, oh, the biggest winner, Nikki Haley, biggest loser, Vivek. You see it. It's almost like a whole apparatus around Nikki Haley to shield her from criticism.
One of the biggest funders of the lawsuits against Trump, including efforts to keep him off the ballot, is Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. That's a $250,000 donor to super PAC supporting Nikki Haley. And so I reject this mainstream media general narrative of dismissing something as a conspiracy theory, when in fact I'm a big fan of going after facts hiding in plain sight.
But you know that when you say these things, you know when you bring up the Gretchen Whitmer thing, you know when you bring up January 6th being an inside job. Yes, 80% of what you talk about might be policy, but when you hit those issues, that's going to take over the news cycle. You know how it works.
Yeah, because, and like even me doing my channel, I realized something. When I talk about like hard politics stuff, like open borders, what else? What else I talked about? Centralized government. These are like hard policy type stuff. It don't get a lot of views. But when I talk about culture war stuff, oh, it gets for my channel, it gets a lot of views. So it's just people that's what just get the attention. And a lot of smart politicians, I think this is what Vivek is doing. They use the culture war stuff and they funnel that attention towards a policy position. So I think it's smart of Vivek's part to hit at those cultural things, but it's not really Vivek's fault that these things get a lot of attention. And this is my problem with the mainstream media. Is like, this is what I'm saying. If you're in the in group, they minimize your negatives and maximize your positives. When you're in the out group, they minimize your positives and maximize your negatives. And this is what they're trying to do to Vivek. Oh, it's your fault all this is happening. You're distracting people from real issues. The claim that media proposed to Vivek. But I don't think that's Vivek's fault. How people respond to what Vivek has to say, that's not his fault. That's out of his control. So to hold him liable for that, I feel like it's not a genuine critique. But I digress. Let's get back.
Should. I'm speaking the truth,
but
as it does evenly across the board.
You know how it works. Are you using that to get attention as you've been slumping in the polls?
To the contrary, I'm actually speaking. You have a lot of political analysts that look at this and say exactly what you're saying. Why aren't you just saying what causes you to poll better? It's what every other political candidate's doing.
Exactly.
They're taking what their consultants serve them up. Here's what the voters say are the top issues. Spout back to them what the voters want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So why?
I'm sharing my true convictions, and I think if we want to revive our constitutional republic, we deserve a government that tells the people the truth again.
This is one problem that I've been talking about too, is that I don't think people can handle an honest politician. And this is the price you pay with an honest politician, is that they're not going to say things that you want to hear. And I think for too long, American politics got so used to people spitting back what they want to hear, like affirmation type stuff. Like, hey, I want you to affirm my beliefs, and then you'll get my vote. Instead of a president say, hey, your beliefs are wrong. Here's the actual solution to fixing the problem. And it's probably go counter to what you thought was true, right? And we should have a culture where people be like, hey, I was wrong about this issue. Hey, this candidate knows what he's talking about. Let's vote for him, regardless of how I personally feel about him. But we don't live in a culture like that. We live in a culture, in a political culture that seems to reward people reaffirming what they already believed pre-existently.
Not just when it's easy, but when it is hard. Our government has systematically lied to us on things that really matter. Of the origin of COVID-19, we were told for years that it didn't come from a lab in China, when it absolutely did. In fact, you were suppressed on social media for saying it.
Exposed.
The eve of the last election, I think it's shameful that the Hunter Biden laptop story was systematically suppressed, so voters didn't have that information.
You're talking about Gretchen Whitmer being an inside job of entrapment.
I'm talking about a government that has lied to its people. The same.
And NBC's also, I think, they get some of their funds from the government as well. In some ways, they get taxpayer funded dollars funneled into their business. So in my view, it's like, hey, like I can even say that NBC, hey, you're compromised. I can't really trust you to believe, like, and That's a critique that people are having about Nikki Haley. Hey, we see all these people backing you. Like, these people who are like Larry Fink, they don't really represent conservative values, conservative ideals. Why are they supporting you, Nikki Haley? The same argument that if someone said, hey, I'm anti-government, I want a valid critique of the government, I don't trust government-funded institutions, and NBC falls into that category as well. NPR, PBS, I don't want to listen to news from government-funded entities. It's the same question here. But then you critique, instead of critiquing, hey, yeah, we know it looks kind of bad, but you're going to attack the person saying, oh, you're conspiracy theorists. You think we won't challenge the government? Oh, well, you get some funding from them. So I think it'll be harder to challenge the government. It's the same critique that Vivek's having about Nikki Haley. I don't understand what's the confusion there, but I digress.
Same FBI that's investigating conservatives, the same FBI and the same law enforcement apparatus, Jack Smith, that has subpoenaed millions of Americans for anybody who liked or retweeted a Donald Trump post in 2020. That's Orwellian, but that's the same federal law enforcement apparatus that put people up to an alleged kidnapping plot that they otherwise wouldn't have been put up to. Multiple defendants acquitted on grounds of entrapment. And so is this a top issue that voters bring up on the mind of voters? Absolutely it's not. But the mainstream media is pushing, and the establishment in both parties is pushing one established narrative.
So if it's not a priority for voters, why are you so focused on it?
Because truth is a priority for me. That's the answer. Truth is the priority for...
That was a great answer, bro. You gotta admit, that was a great answer. Right? Because if you don't know end of the day, I always say, if you don't know the reality of something, how would you create the proper solutions to fix it? And if you're not aware of a problem, you're not going to vote on the problem. So I think he's just trying to bring awareness of how, I guess, corrupt, deeply flawed our government institutions are. The first step into fixing a problem is to acknowledge it exists. And I think this is what Vivek is doing by bringing up these points. I digress.
For this campaign. And I don't need to be speaking to what every other professional politician is spouting off. We need to speak the hard truths that other candidates are unwilling to touch. And even though that doesn't poll necessarily on what NBC or the Des Moines Register or another media outlet is going to ask voters what are the top issues on their mind, it's important. What really is important to many voters, I believe, is a government that trusts them with the hard truth again. That hasn't happened for a very long time. And so my view is, if that's what the voters want, that's what they're going to get from me. If they want somebody who's going to incrementally reform things, change tax rates by 1% one direction or another, and call that a legislative accomplishment, go with somebody else. That's not me. But if you want a candidate who is actually going to revive the ideals of 1776, who is going to trust the people transparently with what the government knows to be true, if you want a government that actually is of and for and by the people again, I think I'm the sole candidate in this race who can deliver that. And that choice is up to the voters.
Yep. It's up to us as the voters to decide that. Like, what do we want? We say we want an honest politician. Okay. That's what we got. We got Trump. Right. But I'm not talking about just Republicans and people who lean right. I'm talking about, like, as a nation, like all of us, like all 400 million of us. What do we want? Do we want an actual leader that's going to, like, actually do some stuff? Because change is uncomfortable, right? Like, when you want something different, it's outside your comfort zone. And I'm talking as a nation, as my fellow countrymen, that we need to step outside our comfort zone and stop hiring the same kind of people, but a different way or a different degree or a different slight. Oh, okay, he's going to increase taxes. No, hey, this person is going to make English a requirement throughout all government documents. What about illegals? What about this? Like, we can't keep worrying about other people, right? You can't keep trying to save other people at the expense of yourself. Eventually, you're going to run yourself ragged. And this is what's going on in this country, that we keep putting ourselves last instead of putting ourselves first. This is why the American First message resonated with so many Americans. I mean, this is just my thoughts. You let me know yours in the comment section. But Vivek handled himself well during this last week. I think, we like, what, day 4 into the new year? And it seemed like it's been Vivek. Well, I think that's what he has to do, because, January 15th is coming up soon. So I think this really helps him. Let me know your thoughts about it. Do you agree with me on Vivek's synopsis? What do you think of Vivek? I really like to hear your thoughts about Vivek, how he handled himself in the interview, how he exposed some of the narratives that the mainstream media are desperately trying to hold on to. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.